So, what's up, YouTube? What's up, Twitch chat? Running through our first ever league with Ketramos, the New Dawn. Aether Drift just dropped on Magic Online, so we've got one of the more exciting cards for us in the test queue to see how it works. Obviously, not Aggravated Assault, but who knows? So, let's talk about the list a little bit because I definitely made some concessions. um, I don't know how they're gonna go. I just wanted to like max out on different exile effects for Ketramos and see how things line up as we get through some games. So, for example, I've got the two copies of Tameo, which pair well with drawing extra cards, but also the fact that something like Ketramos plus Cling to Dust just allows you to immediately flip the Tameo. You get to exile something with Cling, draw off the Cling, draw off the Ketramos, flip the Tameo. Dreams of Steel and Oil, exile something from the yard. Obviously, something's got to be in the yard for it to matter, but we'll see how it plays out. We've got Ghost Vacuums, main deck way to repeatedly hit your opponent's graveyard for an extra draw every turn. We've got Prismatic Endings, exile something. Emperor of Bones exiles every turn. Psychic Frog exiles something when you want to fly it. We've got Murderous Cut and Murktide Regent to delve exile to trigger Ketramos, Murderous Cut being like my replacement here for that Bitter Triumph, shoot the sheriff kind of spot. Do I think we'll have enough cards in the yard for cut? Maybe. Like, I'm not playing the fourth Murktide Regent, so this is like my fourth Delve spell, basically. I really don't think you fly Frog all that often, so your graveyard's not under too much stress. Plus, between throwing cards in the yard, just casting spells, discarding stuff to Frog, drawing more stuff with Ketramos to discard to Frog, I think we'll be okay. Sideboard, we got a couple copies of Stony Silence, some Consigned to Memories, two Anoint with Affliction, which I basically just put in here to try to deal with opposing Ketramos, because I think it'll get tested a lot today. Two Surgical Extraction, another Exile effect. Two Vanishing Verse is a card I'm interested in trying out, regardless of Ketramos. If you're going Esper, I think the ability to exile something at instant speed, like an Underworld Breach, and Tameo, and opposing Murktide, Oculus, anything that's not Aether Vial in the black white blink deck. Um, got a lot of targets. Just interested to see how the card does in general. A Miser Pest Control. I think the card's like reasonable if you're already an Esper. I don't think it's a reason to splash Esper. And then two Nihil Spellbomb. Mana base. I wanted to be on 21 mana sources. This might be heavier on blue than I would like it to be, but I'm hoping with all of our splashes being pretty easy off like a single Hallowed Fountain or a single Watery Grave, that it won't be too much of an issue. So who knows? We'll see what happens. This is just test number one. So let's jump in. Untapping with a 3-drop creature that doesn't impact the board. Interested to see what happens. Same. I did end up having to cut Force of Negations because with Ketramos, Emperors, Clings, Dreams, Ghost Vacuum, Prismatic Ending, I was just like cutting too hard into my blue count for Force. But if it turns out like Ketramos is really good with, say, um, I don't know, just a couple Clings and Prismatics, and you don't really need Ghost Vacuums and stuff, I can easily see that getting swapped around. Go back to a blue or heavy build to protect the Ketramos. Could also be that we need more Thought Seizes, but Thought Seizes doesn't exile a card, so less interested in trying it out in the first league. This hand appears to be missing the prerequisite mana needed to cast our spells. So we're going to drop this one eventually. And it did keep their 7. Got a Tameo, we got a Frog. Back an extra water grave. I might want to get basics early. I can always fetch up the watery grave. I can fetch up surveil lands. Matic ending's pretty good. Okay, so polluted delta could be a mirror match. I could just get island. I think I'm gonna get watery grave though. Like, if it's a mirror match, you're usually kind of getting blown out one way or the other, and an extra point or two of life doesn't really matter. Like, either you answered the Murktide or you didn't. You answered the Frog or you didn't. Removal spell. Okay. Means I might have some surviving Frog. So if this is a mirror match, prismatic ending for Ketchermos could be a big deal. See what we got. So I would assume just counterspell. The reason I'm not just jamming a Frog since I have multiples. If they have counterspell here, they can't untap and like hard cast an Oculus. Best case scenario for them would be counterspell Frog, untap, play a Frog of their own with like spell snare backup, and I can go to my turn and prismatic ending for a white and 2 blue and be able to exile the Frog while playing around counterspell, which is kind of cool. Or playing around spell snare, not counterspell. Ah, we were wrong on all accounts. we were not correct in the slightest on our assumption. Mill, you say? All right, so now I can no longer F6 because I need to have Frog activation in case of a surgical extraction in the main or something like this. Let's go 3. Catch me lacking. All right, we have a prismatic ending target. As long as we still have a hallowed fountain in the deck, which it looks like we do. Ghost Vacuum. I don't know if Ghost Vacuum's doing a whole lot for me here. Get rid of you. I think I'm going to discard the Ghost Vacuum to the Frog. And I'm probably just playing another Frog. 1 counter spell in the yard. So I do have a few of them to draw to. Not holding anything up, so yeah. Let's see what we can do. We can blank a Drown in the Lock. I will happily do if given the chance here. Mill's trying that new monument. What new monument? Let's just go ahead and save our frog real quick. I think I am going to have to discard one card because this is getting me down to 15, or getting me down to 15 cards getting exiled, which means I need to discard one more in exile to get my frog down to, or get my graveyard down to 0 cards. Then I think I'm going to discard the Ketramos because I don't really want to draw a bunch of more cards and I don't want to tap out on this upcoming turn. I'd rather preordain and try to find like a counter spell. Actually, don't even know how I feel about Vacuum. Soul Guide is still a double trigger. It's probably better over Revolver's Breach, but maybe even Eldrazi unless it's tier 1, or unless it's turn 1. Maybe. It's just whether or not you want to draw like 2 cards right now, or if you want to draw a card, an extra card per turn over however many turns. Apparently we are destined to have a Ketramos. Counterspell, and go. Planning on discarding this Ketramos and the Undercity Sewers pretty aggressively. Three cards in hand for OP. I wonder what passing the turn here signifies. I really don't want to put anything on the stack. Like spell-wise, I'd rather not give them the opportunity to like Field of Ruin me off a land. I don't. There's an island, there's a swamp, so yeah, I don't have any more basics in my deck. No reason to try to go for lethal here. Just divide out some damage from the frog. Alright, do I have another shock land? I do have another Watery Grave. So I think I'm interested in playing out this Flooded Strand just so I have the chance of casting all 4 of my spells. Okay. So I was going to say, if I need to do something like Stern Scolding, a crab, counter spell, some mill spell, maybe like Spell Snare, a counter spell, I don't know. Just, I would rather have the options available to me. So sideboarding against mill. Don't really have much here. I could bring in Surgical if I wanted to try to hit something like Ensnaring Bridge out of their side. Vanishing Verse hits a crab, and that's Or I guess it hits Jace too. That's kind of cool. Going with Affliction only hits Crab. Best Control only hits Crabs. I think it's just the 2 Spellbomb. Board everything in. People always love giving that option against Mill, like, just board in everything. And it's so bad. It's so bad when you're just like, okay, I'm going to board in all these cards, and now my opening hand is like double Anoint with Affliction, 1 land, hopefully, because I built or boarded in 15 non-land cards. What else is in my sideboard? Stony Silence. Like a land, Estonia Consign, a Vanishing Verse, maybe a Frog, maybe a Counterspell where you just have like 3 completely dead cards. I'm sure it works for some people and they feel like geniuses, but I know it does not work for me particularly well. What do you think happens faster? Do you think it's faster when someone playing against Mill boards in their 15 cards, or when Mill is staring down a Battle of Wits opponent and they scoop the match? This is going to be interesting. Ketchermos turns on, or Leyline of the Void's going to turn on Ketchermos really quickly. Like, yeah, we don't get Murktide Regent, but we have a backup plan. We also do have Sink into Stupor if we so choose to blink the Leyline later. I'm trying to be conscientious of Archive Trap. I don't think I have much of a choice. I think I just need to play one of my land, like one of my fetch lands here. Like, I wish I could play around Archive Trap, but I think holding on to this Sink into Stupor is a little bit more important. I feel like there's a decent chance that my opponent's going to have like a Fatal Push in hand, and if I throw out the Sink into Stupor, I might not have a backup threat if I can't get the Murktide down. But I am fully expecting them to have an Archive Trap here. Get a tap land anyway, just in case they don't. Wait, what am I talking about? Fatal Push can't even kill Ketchermos. Why are you letting me think these things? I don't even know if they can answer this. And Sync gives me an out to, what's it called as well? Ensnaring Bridge. We're gonna like fetch on our turn, draw a card. I can play another Ketchermos, legendary one of them, goes to exile for Leyline, draw another card. Super funny. Think they're reading. Okay. Now my Ketramos is online. Donks. All right. Borrowing. Counterspell is nice. So I'm probably gonna fetch once to draw a card. And probably just pass with counterspell. Like I just want to see if I can hit a fatal push. There's one in the graveyard so far. Lose life, draw a card. I guess technically life total could matter with Ketramos triggering. I feel like it's not going to because I think the game's just going to be over one way or the other before then. But I guess it is a possibility. Would draw me another card. Yep. Fortunately, this does not. All right. But we got a couple more looks at a removal spell for the crab. And I feel like if we get the crab off the board, we've got a pretty good shot here. I really don't want to waste Sink into Stupor on a crab. It's a pretty good chance that they just got some sort of 3-mana mill spell in hand. Got Swamp gone. We still have another island. Fatal Push. Island. And I think that I'm going to pass. No, we'll just go ahead and Fatal Push. I was going to say pass and try to see if they miss their land drop and go to pick up a Borrow, that I can just Fatal Push in response to that. But I don't think I want to risk them just actually having the land drop off the top and me not getting to respond. Like so. Ketramos broken. I mean, we're only like one game into Ketramos. I don't know if anybody's got data to support that one way or the other just yet. All right, so we're gonna go fetch land to draw. And I believe I'm gonna go ahead and play this second Ketramos to try to draw another. So I really want to hit. I was gonna say I really want to hit Counterspell. But Dreams could potentially hit a. It does get to hit a crab out of the yard, so I'm going to get to exile another card and draw another card with Ketramos. But it could hit an Ensnaring Bridge. They have nothing. Toxic Deluge. Maybe I should have been more worried about that. Well, I guess if they deluge, I can hard cast a Murktide next turn. Deluge my Ketramos. Got 23 cards in hand, so I'm not dead to a Jace. Gives -3, -0. Kind of awkward in the face of my Murktide. But I guess if they don't have a land, they can't play the Jace. Yeah, just desperation Tasha's, try to hit lethal. Ketramos. Ketramos. Definitely drew a few cards there. After having life blink is the broken part. It's pretty good ability to have a card or have on a card that cares about losing life. That little self-correction in there. I wonder if there was a reason for adding that line in playtesting. Like maybe they found opponents exiling stuff on your turn to be too prevalent, and you just couldn't risk having your opponent like burn you out with your own Ketramos triggers. Put MTGO, let them play Jace with Phyrexian mana for lethal. Not being at 1. If they were at 2, then yes, but it won't let you pay more life than you have available. So you can't, if you're at 2 life and you draw a fetch lane, you can't fetch and shock it in to kill yourself. Kind of funny that way. Ghost Vacuum. Really need the vacuum just yet. This is Boros, which I assume it is. Oh, no, is this just Blink? Blink with no Aether Vial is nice. Our boy. I think I'm just sitting on a counter spell in case of Thalia. No Oculus yet. I wanted to play a build that gave me more room for like actual exile effects instead of spending more room on Unearth and Thought Scour and stuff. Just trying to abuse Ketramos a little bit more. Snare's a pretty good pickup. So if I'm able to find a third land, I can Prismatic Ending the Aether Vial and have Spell Snare up in case they have another Thalia. Does not look like they have. You got to do this to me now. Why couldn't you have cast these on like turn 1 or 2? What do we got? Fair enough, deck. Fair enough. I really want to try to hit land drops. So a big part of me wants to preordain here to try to hit a 4th land. I'm a little bit worried. That's a coward's move. I was gonna say I'm a little bit worried that they're gonna have like something to flash in into turn here and then untap and something else. Like this does get a little bit awkward if they just have, say, a Recruiter of the Guard. Like could have held up Counterspell. What would you do for 4 mana? Sure. Witch Enchanter. Blink a Backstreet. That's acceptable. I assume leaving Ephemerate mana up. Ditching a White Orchid Phantom. Which I guess is a reasonable call on their side. Doesn't look like it's doing a whole lot here. So I'm pretty confident they have an Ephemerate. Which means if I do find a 4th land and I go for like Petramos, use the Vacuum, they could Ephemerate the Flicker Wisp in response. I kind of feel like I'm just counterspelling this. I don't love it, but I think I need to just try to find a land for this Fatal Push. So they're going to blow up my Ghost Vacuum, which a little annoying. It's not the end of the world. It's definitely not the end of the world. All right, we're just going to jam Ketramos. Get you on the battlefield one way or the other. Missing this 4th land is hurting a lot, especially if it's a fetch. I don't know how long I've been muted, or if I just muted myself. One way or the other. I just want a 4th land, and I want it to be a fetch. Guess I could ephemerate their Flicker Wisp. Nope. What are we doing on your upkeep? March of Otherworldly Light, the Ketramos. Main deck, March of Otherworldly Light. And they got rid of Belcher. Okay. Show me a fetch land. No, but I will not complain. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Blue, blue. I didn't want to play out the Ghost Vacuum because if they find something to blink their Flicker Wisp and get rid of my Murktide, I want to be able to Fatal Push it. Catcher felt so far, so you're not on the Unearth plan. Well, this first league I'm trying out just Catcher with a bunch of like main deck exile effects. The first match we played against Mill, they Leyline of the Voided me game 2. I played a turn 3 Ketra and proceeded to just like crack fetches while there was nothing they could do about it, which was pretty funny. All right, so I think I want to hold up Think here because if there's a card that they kept on top and they didn't cast it, it's probably something like a Solitude. So if they just go main phase, go to try to exile the Murktide, I probably want to try to sink it. I'm at 1, or not 1, 3. Math is tough. Like a bunch of ways that we're fine here. Overlord, I let go. I don't care if they get back a Felia or a March, or Felia or a White Orchid Phantom. And if they do find a Solitude, I can sink into Stupor the Solitude. They have to exile the last card in the hand, assuming it's white, and they don't get a chance to recast it. So we should beat Overlord. They get back White Orchid Phantom, which is fine, because again, I've got a bunch of Fatal Pushes. I say okay, yes. Phantom can chump me, you say. Are we sticking to that story? Is that the option we are sure we want to go with? Phantom can chump me. Thought they had 2 cards in hand. Gotcha. Wanted to try out Vanishing Verse for this matchup. Anoint, Surgical, all okay. Poured out a chunk of counter spells. Ghost Vacuum's pretty mid. Emperor Frog, Ketramos, Merc pending. Maybe I kind of want the surgicals. Maybe they're not as good as I want them to be. I want the annoyance. I'd probably trim on a Murktide. Not expecting them to bring in Rest in Peace, but stranger things have happened. I could cut Tameo. Kling's probably pretty mid. Maybe I'm just trimming on some amount of cantrips. I could cut a snare, keep the consider. Probably fine. Surgical still a banger if you hit Solitude. Deck kind of sucks ass without it. It's decent without it. I wouldn't say sucks ass, just well, not having an answer to a turn 2 Overlord is rough, but I do have an answer to Vile in their first like 3 plays. Black White's only good because of Solitude. Still kind of agree to disagree. Like, if we're talking specifically into this matchup, it's definitely a lot better because of Solitude. Still a Vile deck, still like a card advantage deck with Overlord. Still has a bunch of really good tools against us without Solitude. And I would argue that Solitude is like less good against a lot of the other decks in the meta. Back a bunch of Emperors. So they have an Emperor in hand. I could just go to Surgical those. Or I could just play my Emperor, go to combat, exile theirs, which I don't hate. So I play out Emperor, go to combat, exile their Emperor. Yeah. No, I don't want to do that because I don't want them to potentially. Or do I care if they Flicker Wisp their Bale Merc? Because I do have the Murderous cut for it. I guess I kind of do. A coward. Troll Freak Stream, maximum poggers. Maximum poggies, not even poggers. Some amount of pog. Show me the Flicker Wisp. Got him. Now, Flicker Wisp, I would put Flicker Wisp on the list of like acceptable surgical extraction targets. I do think the card is a really, really good value engine, especially with Overlord, because you start creating this loop where you're able to like block with Flicker Wisp, Overlord attack, get back to Flicker Wisp, blink the Overlord, get another card, block with the Flicker Wisp, repeat. And it can be kind of difficult to mess up. A big part of me really thinks that I should just surgical the Flicker Wisp. But I guess I'm kind of hoping that they go for Emperor of Bones, target the Flicker Wisp. I get to anoint the Emperor. I don't like having to do anything in response to a Thoughtseize here. Push, Solitude, Overlord. I take the guaranteed 1-for-1. I kind of feel like they should just take the Murderous Cut. Like, take the answer to the Overlord. Yeah. Yep. Get back. Probably Flicker Wisp. Okay, so we can Emperor. We could Recruiter if we want to, which can get a frog. Right? Yeah. I guess they could Solitude if they want to. Bella, thank you so much for the follow. Hope you're having an awesome afternoon. I think I'm going to go ahead and go for this because if they want to Solitude my Emperor, that does get the Flicker Wisp out of hand. Yeah. I still have to answer these Overlords, but like one step at a time. It means that they don't just have an Overlord sitting on the battlefield. All right, come on, Ketramos. Ketramos. You know what? That's reasonable. I can't. Can I just target this and not exile it? I'm pretty sure I can, right? Yeah. You would have to say like exile target non-land permanent with mana cost 3 or less. But it's exile target permanent if its mana cost is 3 or less. Here's a Murktide. And I'm pretty sure I'm still going to have to find an answer to this first Overlord next turn. But if I, or the Solitude, but if I can find an answer to one of those, then we might be able to sneak it out here. Or I guess if they proceed to top deck like a non-white card, non-land, non-white card, 2 turns in a row, which probably isn't happening because they kept a card on top. So We could get this Murktide up to 9. Probably isn't worth it. 1, 2, 3. Now, if I had one more card in hand, then I could get the Murktide up to 9 and have enough mana or enough cards in hand to Frog next turn, but they've got the Fatal Push, so... I think opponent's a little bit not happy with me top decking Murktide. But at the same time, I feel like you kind of can't be upset about a top deck Murktide as you've got double Overlord on the battlefield and a Solitude in the yard. Yeah, now they just have like a Solitude loop going. So they got back Aven Interrupter. They just drew another Solitude. All right. I do love that. Must be nice top decking. Like, you're top decking too. Bring the extra Merc back in on the play. I should probably bring some counter spells back in. Especially on the play when you hit the Overlord. Yeah, definitely should have kept in a couple counter spells on the play. But well. Usually I'm not playing like Vanishing Verse and what's it called in the sideboards. I don't have that much to board out. Isn't Spellbomb or Vacuum good enough to keep in since Overlord is our problem? So it's a risk play. If you bring in Grave Hate against Black-White, you're hoping that Overlord doesn't hit anything off its own triggers. Because if it hits something, you can't interact with it regardless. So bringing in Grave Hate is kind of saying, like, I hope the Overlord interacts in this specific way. Like they've got something in the yard and they're able to get back that thing in the yard if that thing in the yard is necessary, but not something they put there off an Overlord trigger. So it just gets a little, like, inconsistent, and I don't really want my sideboard plan to be more inconsistent. I really want it to be kind of heads up. These are my cards. This is my plan. Alright, so we didn't get solituded on our upkeep. That's cool. Darcy go. I didn't play in Portland. I'm not playing until Charlotte next month. Get rid of the Overlord. Go ahead and preordain. Finding a pending is nice. I think I'm going to keep the Flooded Strand on top, draw into the pending next turn to save it from like a potential Thoughtseize. All those years of playing against Legacy, taxes finally paying off. No, they don't play Thoughtseize. All those years of brainstorming away cards to protect from Thoughtseize paying off. What would you like to take? Take my sink into stupor. You have another Overlord? You do have another Overlord. But like right here, if I had a Ghost Vacuum or Spellbomb or something, I could take out the Recruiter, but they would still be able to pick between Felia, Trawler, and Flicker Wisp. So like that Graveyard Exile, kind of mid. Not bad, just not great. All right, so I've got Prismatic Ending for the Vial. I know they have a Flicker Wisp in hand, and I kind of need to find an answer to that sooner rather than later. I could fly the frog, but I'm probably going to have to deal with this Emperor of Bones at some point anyway. So I am kind of tempted to just like push the Emperor, exile the Aether Vial. But I guess the downside of that is if I find... No, I just need to kill this Emperor and attack. Trying to like play around lines that if I find Counterspell, but I boarded out Counterspell and I just have Stern Scolding in. Probably should have preordained first, but here we are. Okay. Decent turn. Now we hope that they go for the Flicker Wisp. Eventually. We hope our opponent doesn't have a copy of Mana Tithe. All right, we have Cameo's not bad. Do really need to find some good stuff off this frog sooner rather than later. So I'm going to let the frog trigger go on the stack and then get the Undercity Sewers just in case they have like a fatal push or something. Anoint is a good card, but I'm already not using this one in hand, so I don't think I want another one. Off the assumption that our opponent does not have a copy of something like Wrath of the Skies, and if they do, they can't answer the Murktide, so see what you got. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So they could March of Otherworldly Light the Murktide by tapping out and exiling 2 cards from their hand. I would accept that. Maybe playing out the Tameo last turn was greedy. I could have just had Anoint in hand in case they had something like another Emperor of Bones. They have the Ephemerate. That's like worst case scenario. I guess the bright side here is I couldn't have done anything about this. No, they don't have the Ephemerate. They've got March. Okay. That could have been worse. Go ahead and crack. I unfortunately do not have an Overlord in the graveyard, or I would love to sink this one and surgical both of them. Emperor of Bones can resolve. Am I letting them target something? I guess I can let them target and plan on surgicaling. Or I could just Anoint with Affliction. That I love to see, because now I get to take out what I wanted to surgical anyway, while also stopping the Emperor. Not gonna lie, this Anoint has looked gross. How so? You just mean like not looking as good as you want it to, or that's an interesting one. I can Emperor back like their Trawler. And hit him for a chunk. Nuke the rest of the yard. I could Emperor back their recruiter and go get a frog. I can't play it right now, so I think I'm going to just get their trawler and nuke their yard. Or I could get their Emperor. Is that worth it at all? I can get Flicker Wisp and attack and reset my Emperor. I kind of like that. Yep. Okay. Overlord comes in. So I'm probably going to be Emperoring the Boggart Trawler. Does that change anything? I can Petramos, trigger something with Emperor, draw a card. They don't have Solitudes in their deck anymore. I do get to flip this Tameo if I want, which gets me really close to Vanishing Verse. All right, I'm going to risk it on trying to hit a land. We're going to hit the Trawler. Draw a card off Petramos. We get to see if I hit a land before I decide on Emperor. Your yard, draw another card. Flip Tameo. Draw a card off Tameo flipping, because that's a thing. Attacking. Can I just attack with both? I feel like it doesn't. If they block with Recruiter, I'm kind of happy about that. Like they want to spend their turn overlording and getting back another card, that's fine. You're attacking at Tameo. They get a Fairy Macabre or a Recruiter, both of which I'm pretty okay with. We get the free block with our 4/4 Indestructible Lifelinker. Gets a Flicker Wisp, so they've got one unknown card in hand And all I want to do is play in a way that that one unknown card, being something like an ephemerate, doesn't blow me out. So what can I do to not get blown out by ephemerate? I guess I can just go for the Vanishing Verse, and if they've got ephemerate, I can still sink into stupor the Overlord. Or I still have Hallowed Fountain in my deck. So if they did ephemerate, I could still like get back a Vanishing Verse, fetch up a Hallowed Fountain, and exile it if necessary. Yeah, you could sink the ephemerate too. Get the verse back with Tamiyo and draw more cards. Now you're thinking. Now you're doing a big think. I think opponent might just be running out the clock. Not sure. I don't feel like there's a lot they can do from this position. Especially since they'd have to kill me with like a minute and a half left or something. I could have also saved the Vanishing Verse, sink into stupor the Overlord, and Tamiyo back Surgical, and just Surgical the Overlord from the yard and the Overlord from hand. Draw a card off Ketramos for the Surgical, exiling the one from the yard. Hold my Vanishing Verse. Like, we had some lines. We had some lines available. Did Ketra flip Tamiyo? It did. I think we already had the Tamiyo on board and attacking, so it wasn't like, oh, we flipped Tamiyo because we had Ketra. But I think it was one of those turns of like exile something from the yard with the Emperor of Bones, draw a card, attack, Boggart Trawler, exile their yard, draw a card, flip Tamiyo, and then the Tamiyo flip also triggers Ketramos. So that got us like a third card. We probably drew a good, 6 or 7 cards with Ketramos there, which is about as much as you can ask for out of a 3-drop. That's what I want, Tamiyo flip triggering Ketra. It does work that way. But that was really cool to beat black-white, not feeling like I sideboarded optimally. Verse looked really good too. Verse did look good. Being able to take out Overlord like on the enchantment half is really cool. They don't have any multicolored cards. Vial's the only thing you don't hit. The exile obviously being relevant. I agreed to an extent with, what was it, Pandas talking about Anoint looking gross. There were some moments that like Anoint was fine, being able to exile something before they could get a loop going. It's not optimal. I wouldn't think it is. It's mostly just there in case we run into opposing Ketramos. But obviously, if we don't run into opposing Ketramos, then it's a pretty lackluster interactive spell. You could run like Path to Exile in that spot and probably be fine. But at the same time, there were multiple points over the course of that match where our opponent had like 4 lands in play and miss their 5th land drop for a few turns. And you got to think about those turns being, well, what if they had a Solitude in hand? What if they had an Overlord and they were waiting for the 5th land and Path would have just given it to them? Is that a risk I'm willing to take? Okay. We're on the draw. This happened to me a lot the other day where I kept having these hands on the draw with an Undercity Sewers as my only black source. And if my opponent's on something like Energy, it looks really, really bad. Channeler. So I'm assuming Hollow One. If that's the case, then Spell Snare is probably not doing anything for me. So I'm just going to play Undercity and pass. But like, I would really love for this Fatal or this Undercity Sewers to just be like any untapped black source in a game like this. Psychic Frog. I do like Psychic Frog quite a bit. It looks really bad if they've got a Fatal Push. I also kind of wonder if I need to lean towards getting some spells in the yard to get Murktide down. So I could shock or bolt in the Sink into Stupor, know that I have access to Fatal Push. Could Spell Snare if they go for something like a Fear of Missing Out. A little bit awkward if they just have, say, a Burning Inquiry. But I think worst case scenario is I go for Frog and they just have like an upkeep Fatal Push and they get 3 Surveil triggers. 3 Surveil triggers plus kill my Frog. More than likely hit Delirium. I think that's like an explosive start that I just cannot afford to give my opponent a chance of having. Flame Rift. Oh my god, what are we doing? I mean, I'm glad we held out or held up Spell Snare, but still. MF Flame Rift. Is it Shadow? I'd be kind of surprised if it is, especially with Dreadhorde Arcanist over here. But no, I've been wrong before. I will be wrong again. Maybe they've got Scourge of the Skyclaves. That's a pretty stereotypical Flame Rift card. Unearth Dreadhorde Arcanist. Need lands no matter what. Okay, what does this look like if I keep the island? I'm probably playing Frog and passing. They have Dreadhorde, Lightning Bolt me, double Channeler. So they're hitting me for 7. no matter how I block. Down to 3. I get a channeler off the board. If I ditch like everything but Murktide. Or I can just Fatal Push the Dread Horde and plan to Murktide next turn. I think I need to go bottom. Because I'm not using this extra mana anyway. But I guess I'm not Ketramosing anytime soon. So I dislike everything about this turn. If I go Frog, double discard like Ketramos Counterspell. Exile 1, 2, 3 to fly the frog, block. I don't know. I think I'm just like way too far behind here. But how are we going to Death Shadow with our lifelinker? So I had a thought the other day, and apparently my entire Discord community is not behind me and they think I'm talking crazy. But what about Blue-Black Shadow with a sideboard plan of like 3 Ketramos and a Hallowed Fountain? So that you can just sideboard out like some number of Shadow or something in the matchups that you're up against Solitude, or you don't want to lower your life aggressively, and you just get to board in like 3 Ketramos. Talking crazy, you do remember the first time you ever played against me, you beat me with a Shadow Spear on a Death Shadow? The old Golgari Shadow meme trap that nobody believed in. I miss that deck so much. I gotta break it out at some point. Kevin. Okay, Kevin. Kevin, hear me out, Kevin. Kevin, you paying attention to me, Kevin? Abzan. I know. Stay with me. Don't run off just yet. Abzan with Ketramos and Scavenging Ooze. Ketramos, Scavenging Ooze, You can say you love it. I'll allow you to say that, and it will be great. I thought about Keen-Eye Curator, but I didn't like the double green on casting it with Ketramos. I figure with Scavenging Ooze, you can cast it easier. The exile's a little more difficult, but you can just like casually hit some stuff as you want. I would absolutely co-stream that. 100%. It doesn't even have to be Shadow. It just sounds fun at that point. Alright, Annoyance, Vanishing Verse, Pest Control, Spell Bomb, I guess. Board out. Ghost Vacuums, because I'm bringing in better interaction for the yard. Board out a couple counter spells. Emperor. Cameo. Something like that. Then play Soul Cauldron. You could play Soul Cauldron. Pretty good with Skoos and Ketramos. Yuck. Kevin coming in with a 12-month resub. Co-stream him coming. I am like, you have no idea how down I am for that. That sounds so much fun. I know I'm keeping the archive for just a turn 1 value land. I could throw back the Hallowed Fountain, keep all interaction. I think that's reasonable. Got a few shots of just like seeing another land. Then you go. Just sub and I still get ads. What the fuck, Bezos? I have no control over it. I have never adjusted my ad settings on Twitch ever. So as far as like anything I can do to make ads less prevalent, I will, but I have no idea how to adjust it. So someone's gonna have to like come in hot and help out on that one. So we do an abs and co-stream. Let's figure out a list. I gotta play Esper Ketramos today, but I'll hop on over into your Discord and we can work out a list to play. I'm just gonna pass with Anoint or Cling. Andre, thank you so much for the follow. Hope you're having an awesome afternoon. All right, well, I guess we're just killing this. I want to like Aether Spark for Abs and Stoneblade, but it feels like a trap. All right, hold up. I gotta read Aether Spark again. I know I've seen the card. As long as the Aether Spark is attached to a creature, the Aether Spark can't be attacked and has whenever equipped creature deals combat damage during your turn, put that many loyalty counters on the Aether Spark. +1, attach it. Up to one target creature you control, put a 1/1 counter on that creature. -5, draw 2 cards. So if you Stoneforge it up, the turn after, Stoneforge it in, tick it up, assume put it on a creature, hit them for like 2. This goes up to 7. And you can draw 2 the turn after. Assuming you can have something better to do than just cook or throw it on like some random 1/1. Someone cooked here. We still attempting to cook. Look at this Exile a Dreadhorde Arcanist. Have you ever seen somebody just get so utterly destroyed by a magic card? Bomo, push, Inquisition, Lightning Bolt, Tarfire. I guess I'm supposed to go ahead and Cling to Dust just in case I hit a Murktide. Or something I can cast out, sure. A bunch of cards that don't kill ketamine. Well, we got to find the ketamine. That's kind of the issue we are running into here, is the thing we need to close out the game is not the thing in our hand at the moment. Nope, not today, Satan. Not today, Satan. I'm sorry I talk shit. I'm sorry, ketamine. Don't hold it against me, please. Special K, baby. Oh boy. You ready for this Cling to Dust in the yard to go ham? Shadow. Ooh. Ooh. Do I care? They've got double push, Tarfire, Inquisition. I know their hand. Assuming I cling to dust, I could cling to dust to Street Wraith if I wanted to. Gain 3 off the cling, draw 2 cards, go down to 16, go up to 19 off the Wraith Exile, hit them for 4, go up to 23. They go down to 6. If they Tarfire themselves into turn and go down to 4, even if they top deck a Battle Rage, it's not lethal. One, two, three, four, five. What didn't get exiled? Two. Draw a card. Shadow on the other side. When did we become the enemy? I wish I knew. The world is scary and confusing now, and don't like it. So we attack. We go up to 23. Ketchermos is online because Cling to Dust exiled us up to 7 cards. We are not dead to a Teamer Battle Rage. But yeah, apparently somewhere we lost our way and we didn't play enough shadows, so someone else had to pick up the mantle. Bard, thank you so much for the follow. Hope you're having an awesome afternoon. Am I changing anything up now that I know their shadow? Probably not. My brand is tarnished. To be fair, my brand has been tarnished for a hot minute, so this isn't like anything new. Now I see who bought the last catcher I needed. Well, to be fair, I haven't bought anything on this account. So I will not be held liable for any of that. I do have a catcher on my other account, though, that I opened from a sealed pool. So if you're needing one, I might have one for sale. Gotta pay the bills somehow. Blood Crypt 4. Kind of rude. Kinda rude. Take my pending. Well, it does make my mana requirements a lot easier. Well, drawing the polluted delta makes it fine anyway, but I was gonna have to decide between getting an Undercity Sewers or an archive here. But now that they've taken away my need for white mana, I can just get an Undercity Sewers. We're gonna see a double shadow here. I mean, if they just fetch down or mold to 5 and just had like Thoughtseize, double Wraith, double fetch, double shadow, then not a whole lot I can do about that. Really need a secondary. I guess there's something I can do about that. Opponent, I'm sorry. Please don't hold it against me. I have been on your side of the fence as well. I know the pains. You're not alone. I have also been solituded with multiple shadows out. I get it. Not a good feeling. Another one. There. Look at you pending a shadow. What's next? You gonna solitude one next to you, please? Oh, bro. I was not ready for this. Oh man, I was not ready for this. Just have to target something. Up to one target. I do deserve this. I think I'm gonna go pending the shadow, bolt in, and go ahead and play out the Emperor. I can play it out second main phase. Well, am I planning on blocking? Probably not, but actually I might. I've got the sync, so you can just like preserve life total. Mike has completed his heal turn. Feel like I'm getting a lot of unnecessary flack on this one. I didn't really deserve this. Yes, I do want to play out. Well, the Murktide's only a 6/6. I don't want to play out the Murktide yet, but I am a little bit afraid of Salt Seas. But I kind of like making this Murktide one turn clock. That being said, I'm 100% ready to have this, like, what's it called? The one Phyrexian white, the protection spell. Yep, should have played it out last turn. Yeah, Apostle's Blessing. I knew there was a decent risk of this Murktide getting shut off. Two can play at this game. Oh, man. Come on, Ketchermos. Come on, Ketchermos. We'll take a frog. More than likely discarding whatever I draw just so I can attack in. Is this the list on your box field? It is. It should be like a little extension somewhere around here on the screen, and it should be in that as well. If they drew a removal spell, they would have just used it. So I think I'm turning this frog into a removal spell. Oh my god, why did I think this frog was a 2/4? Oh my god, I'm an idiot. That's on me. I deserve to lose this one. I was like, oh yeah, the frog totally survives. Giving myself a punt. It's okay. Why discard there? Because I'm an idiot and was thinking that the frog, for whatever reason, was getting up to 4 toughness. Doesn't matter. Never punished. Never been punished in my entire life. Draw perfect. Game's easy. I have a catcher most. You don't have a catcher most. Let's do this. Please don't dismember my catcher most. Mr. Freak, why do you think Blue Black X has done so poorly at the RCs? Please, Mr. Freak is my father. Call me Control. I think there's a few theoretical reasons that I have. Some of which include, I guess we can go over this real quick right before we get into the next match. Some of my thoughts on why Dimir has done pretty poorly in the recent RCs and whatnot. One, I think that people went into a lot of these with inconsequential, or not, that's not the word for it, incomplete data. Especially Prague, where Dimir had like the worst showing out of any of those events. Everybody went in splashing white for Esper and just got wrecked. And then we started to see a trend with Ottawa and with Japan about the white splash not making the deck positive against Boros. It did improve the breach matchup, but everything else dropped. Like every other matchup across the board declined, except for breach. Wrecking breach, losing to everything else. So I think that going into it with the expectation of white just making like the Boros matchup and the breach matchup free was a bit limited in sight. And I think that was kind of displayed by the commentary saying that Pest Control was like the most sought after card at all the vendors. People were just going in there without having tried it. Just, this is the hotness. This is what I need to play. Go for it. And I don't think the data supported needing that splash, and especially that many people needing that splash. Then between Prague and Ottawa, or no, Prague and Ottawa were saying weekend. Between Prague and Portland, you didn't see like any adjustments whatsoever. Everybody played like the exact same 75 that they were playing the weekend of Prague and Ottawa. Nothing was changed up. Still on pest controls. Still on like Harbinger of the Seas in the main and an open deck list event. Same threat displays and everything, while the meta was shifting around it. So I don't like the fact that it appears a lot of people playing Frog were kind of like dead set on their list ahead of time and didn't adjust at all. I'm not saying that there were a long list of adjustments that could have been made. I just don't think that there were enough people making a concerted effort to try to figure out what those adjustments should have made or should have been. For example, the Frog list, the Esper list is apparently getting clapped all over the place by Black-White, by Blink. And I didn't see a single copy of Esper anywhere running Vanishing Verse. I found that card in like 13 seconds just searching through some exile effects. And we played against Black-White like the second round of this league and kind of ran them over. So it's like, okay, if this card was here and nobody found it, is it because nobody tried to find it? Which that seems wild to me. If you had like these bad showings and didn't try to go find anything to improve these matchups. Sorry, definitely a bit of a rant there. There's more Frog than I expected. I played against it twice. Several of the day 2 Frog players played against Frog multiple times, which is kind of funny. All right, well, we are definitely going to end that thing. I would like to save this flooded strand for a meticulous archive. So I'm just going to shock in, play the Emperor, exile the Curator. They go. It's okay to say that Frog strats are not the best right now since the top decks are attacking from different angles and we cannot put so many cards for it. I would say I agree that the current iterations of Frog are not particularly good. That doesn't mean that Frog can't adjust and come up with strategies that are good. I just don't think that the current builds are really where you want to be. So I would agree with that sentiment. By being the enemy, I can assure Esper Frog is much better than Dimir versus Orzhov. What is your reasoning there? Like, what about Esper is making it better? Because the interaction suite should be the same, or even a little more limited. It should just be, what's it called? Pest control, which does like nothing into Esper or into Black White, and Rest in Peace, which is like okay. Unless you're talking about the new Ketra build, in which case probably ain't good that round. I don't think I can afford to have multiple Murktides. That's a pretty cool draw. Because now if I hit an untapped land, I was specifically talking about Ketra builds. Yeah, Ketra I think changes everything. I was talking specifically about the builds that were already played at the RCs. I want Ketra, but I think I have to forego it to get down this Murktide right here. Get to flip Tameo. I get to play out the Murktide. They get back Flage. And I kind of hope that I can find an answer to the Flage ASAP. Unless they have Vial, which is where the Prismatic Ending is good. Yeah, we pendinged a bunch of Vials in that match. Esper List have been playing more Counterspell, which trades well with Black White's 3-drops. Yeah, Dimir should be doing that. It was kind of I don't want to say weird train, but I don't really understand why a bunch of these. That's pretty good. Why a bunch of these Dimir players originally just like started going all in on this no counterspell plan. I think that was another situation where there really wasn't enough data to support that was the right way to go. But we kind of had people going, oh yeah, of course it's right. Like it's obvious that that's the right way to go. And I guess I'm probably going to want that at some point. You know, I can't Fatal Push the Solitude, but Solitude is not doing a whole lot into Tameo. Also, Frog decks need to get away from Oculus builds. Those builds are so bad. I don't think it's so much that they need to get away from the Frog builds or the Oculus builds as it is. They need to embrace that is what they're trying to do if that's what they're planning on doing. I think the issue we ran into was all of these Frog decks kind of going, Or all these Oculus decks going, well, I'm going to try to play the control game. I'm going to try to like play a bunch of cards that work towards my late game. A bunch of stuff that improves my card filtering. And I'm going to give up the entire reason that like I'm playing Frog and I'm doing well with Frog or with Oculus, sorry, which is the fact that I can cheat out an Oculus. But if you're just like gearing your deck towards hard casting Oculus on turn 3, or even trying to set up Unearth on turn 3, which 9 times out of 10, especially if you're not running Counterspell, it just isn't better than actually hard casting Oculus on turn 3, then what's the point? Problem with Counterspell is that you want to use to trade up in mana or be mana neutral. The meta's best decks at the moment are 0-1 drops or big ramp decks. So part of that I agree with. Part of it I disagree with. I think the reason to play Counterspell is to have the ability to say, I'm not dying right now. There's going to be plenty of times that you want to be like more reserved with it or whatever, but I think the end goal should always be like, I'm playing this card in my deck so that I have an additional out to not just be dead to whatever the problematic thing is. Green Suns for 4. Just an Omnath. Yep. I think I am... Okay, I was going to say, I think I'm trading Frog for Solitude there. But really, I'm just looking for a catcher most at this point. I could trade off Tamiyo for the Fatal Push to kill the Omnath. That looks kind of decent. Got cursed with an ad. Okay, I'll go back over my rant in a second. Let me figure out what I'm doing here. So I lose Tamiyo. That gives me Revolt to get this push back. So I can kill the Omnath. I think I'm just flying both of the frogs. Ghost Vacuum for double Flage wasn't an option. So with Ghost Vacuum, there's a weird interaction with Flage. Ghost Vacuum is not making a copy of the creature. It's making them a 1/1 spirit. If you Ghost Vacuum a Flage, it sacks itself immediately and goes back to your opponent's graveyard. So I would be giving up my Ghost Vacuum to give them back their 2 Flages in the yard, which might be a little less than ideal for me. All right, so let's exile Omnath, draw a card. Could... No, I can't Prismatic Ending the Dryad Arbor because it's non-land. So I think I just say go. Hold up Stern Scolding. Yeah, it's weird with Ghost Vacuum and Omnath for sure. You want it to do what exactly like you said, have like double removal spell catcher or a double removal spell Flage and be able to keep one around to keep attacking and pinging stuff off. But the wording on Flage making it sacrifice itself and the fact that Ghost Vacuum doesn't make it into a token can kind of create some awkwardness. Special K time. All right. Consign can hit some ETB abilities. They did have Flage, Omnath, Solitude. I think are all like reasonable surgical targets. Don't want Vanishing Verse. Anoint exiles Flage, but doesn't hit Omnath or Solitude. Spell Bomb could be okay as an additional way to hit the yard, but I do have Surgicals and Ghost Vacuums already. Push is probably necessary. I'm going to cut Spell Snare. I don't know if it hits anything from them or not. I usually like to trim a Murktide against decks with Solitude, just because you don't want to nuke your graveyard a whole bunch. I like Murderous Cut a little bit more here. Maybe not bring in the third Consign. Ending's probably pretty mid. But I guess at the same time, they could have like Teferi or Wrenn and 6. Do you think it's possible to adjust the mana to support Wrath of the Skies? You could. I don't know if you need to, but you could if you wanted to. I would just do something like replace the second Watery Grave with a second Hallowed Fountain. Probably try to find room for a basic Plains over second basic Island. But kind of like everybody's saying in chat, I don't think it's really something that you should feel like you need to do. It's fine if you just want to like have a couple extra answers into something like Breach, but I don't know if it's any better than a card like Pest Control that you can already play. All right, Counterspell is a nice pickup. We'll hold up that in case we get to Counterspell a Teferi or a Risen Reef, something like that. I think I'm just going to go ahead and nuke the yard to Murderous Cut this Halfling here. I know it takes me off Murktide, but my Murktide would just be like a 3/3 anyway, so I don't think it matters too much. I do not want the Halfling on board if I go to try to counterspell an Omnath. Wrenn and 6 in 2025. People are wild out there with their Wrenn and 6s. I'm convinced that you got a lot of people that are going around saying, oh, I spent $85 a piece for my Wrenn and 6s back when they were first coming out, and so I'm gonna play my Wrenn and 6s. Paid a fortune for Addisons back in the day. I'm gonna use them. Exactly. So we can Emperor hit the 6. I think I just want to try to find a prismatic ending, or I guess Ketramos is fine. Or No, I'm not playing Ketchermos out into a Solitude, right? There's like no chance they don't just main phase it. Now, if they hard cast Solitude, I've got two potential answers into it. This. Are they going to double Ren and 6 this? They double Ren and 6 down tick this. I feel like a god right now. Deal. Deal all day. I unfortunately do not have the mana necessary to Petramos Cameo Preordain. Well, I guess I wouldn't flip anyway. I can't Ketramos Murktide. Let's try to find like want the Watery Grave. Need to find an answer to this Flage. This lets me double spell. Carry on. 58.99 ticks for MTGO. You're talking about for Ketramos? Putting the opponent to 0 life is a good answer to Flage. Unfortunately, I don't have the ability to do that at the moment. Omnath, okay. Omnath Binding. That is an answer to a Flage. Also answers an Atraxa. Isn't that convenient? All right. Who on stream so far has become a Dreams of Steel and Oil believer? I feel like I've been wrecking some 2-for-1s with that card. Could just immediately flip the Tameo. Catcher would be able to attack enough in the exile. If I cling to Dusted, it would. They've got 3 in their exile now. Cling to Dust would give me 4 more on my side. So it would be enough. $16, you say? Is there any chance we can find a way to kill our opponent from here? I don't think I want either of these. I'm going to use both of my surveils. I could frog and get 3 more counters on the Murktide. I think I'm just going to go for attack at you. Plan on cracking this clue just to see if I can find a removal spell for the Omnath. Flip the Tameo, play the Frog, and now I've got a Murderous Cut lined up next turn if they don't find anything relevant. I don't think the one extra power on the Frog matters. When I say I don't think the extra power on the Frog matters, I mean like in the face of Solitude or Leyline Binding or something that would answer the Frog, having that one extra point isn't going to do anything by being able to discard the Polluted Delta. So I think I'd rather have one, the mana, two, the cards in the graveyard to do something like Escape, Cling to Dust. Because I might Tameo, Buyback Cut, kill the Omnath, and want to Cling to Dust after if possible. And even if they attack with the Omnath, I would get one extra or one less power from the Omnath coming in, and I could discard down to the Frog to bounce off the Omnath, but then they'd just be able to Rin Ping, and that's not quite where I want to be. You've got it. AXR, thank you so much for the follow. Hope you're having an awesome afternoon. Win, turn 2 Ren or 2024-25 cards. Well, at the moment, the turn 2 Ren's looking pretty solid. Our hero needs to find some interaction of some sort. Rin plus Omnath and fetch lands does a pretty good bit of work. I think I'm saving the Tameo. Brave of you to assume you're the hero of this match. That's also very fair. Halfling is down. Not entirely sure what I'm looking for here. I guess Preordain's a pretty good start. Getting back Ketchermos doesn't do anything. Well, I guess I could get back Ketchermos and have a Frog Jump to draw. Could be an option. I don't think it's a necessarily good option. I'm just going to bend that, take the consider. I see. So I fly both frogs, swing in. They do get to endurance block, so I think we're just going to game 3. I'm also pretty low on time. Do I want Spell Snare back in? We saw Ren. I don't think we saw anything besides Ren that cares about Snare. Verse for Binding could be okay. It also hits Solitude and Endurance. But it doesn't hit Ren, doesn't hit Omnath, doesn't hit Teferi. Maybe one. I don't think I want both of them. Doesn't hit Flage. Okay. I was being told Ren and Omnath weren't good anymore. Depends on your definition of good. It's the kind of card combination that, like, you're always going to find some random people jamming that just absolutely refuse to give up on it. You have the halfling. Exactly like Frog. Green Suns for 0. Option number 1 is just play out Ghost Vacuum to try to set up for Ketramos next turn. Option number 2, kill the Dryad. They could just have Ren and be able to Ren back the Dryad next turn. I don't know what I'm cutting them off of if I stop a 3-drop here. I also don't know what I'm fatal pushing if I don't. They can't cast a fairy with a Stomping Ground and a Dryad Arbor. So there's the Ren, get back Dryad Arbor. Oh, no, not getting back Dryad Arbor. Let's go Ghost Vacuum, hold up, Counterspell. We can fight over the Ren target. We can counterspell like a Teferi or something if it comes down here. And hopefully we can find a 4th land to be able to Ketramos plus hold up Consign for like a Solitude. Gotta take that, right? We will consign this trigger. Okay. Dreams of Steel and Oil. See what our opponent has got going on. Solitude, Solitude, Flage. Another binding. So that's a rough one. They don't have lands though, so this Ghost Vacuum's doing some work into the Ren. Yeah, our clock is a little bit lower than I would like. Play out this Emperor just to try to eat some removal spell out of their side. Could just be a hard cast Flage, but like it's a hard cast Flage, it's not hitting something else, right? Endurance is annoying, but fine. Main phasing this really makes me feel that they've got a fetch land for Ren is one of their last two cards. So I think I am going to counterspell this and keep my vacuum around. Love to see it. We've got Solitude, Flage. Was Green Sun's their last card? I gotta scroll up so far. Green Suns. Dreams, Leyline Binding, Solid. Yeah. If they want to evoke Solitude to try to deal with this. And has kept a card on top. Looks like a land for a hard cast Solitude. I had to go out on a limb. So I think I'm just going for like a value Ketramos here. I'm thinking about solituding in response. So let's put a target with Emperor Bones on the stack. They're going to respond to this with Solitude. I'm going to respond with Surgical Extraction on my Flooded Strand. And I'm just going to get rid of all my Flooded Strands. I don't need those. I'd rather find gas. I've got a Ketramos trigger to draw. I've got a Ghost Vacuum to target something and draw. I've got Consider, put stuff in the yard, discard to Frog, and draw. I'm just trying to get as much value as I possibly can out of this Ketramos before it goes away. Exile my Ketramos, and I'm going to draw. Another Solitude. Green Suns for an Omnath. There's another Ketramos. I mean, the first one was okay and got that much respect, and the second one's got to be decent too, right? Discard Surgical, discard this, Fly the frog, draw off the Ketramos. Hit the Ren, draw a card. Land for turn, fatal push the Omnath. Go. I don't know if I have enough time on the clock to win here, but obviously we're going to give it a shot and see what happens. Ooh. I think I'm going to get back their Omnath with Emperor. I don't have another land. If I go Emperor, get back. Oh no, I gotta go to combat first. Shit. Shit. Rid of that anyway. I know, I know. Quality sequence followed by not quality sequence. Another Omnath. Okay. Definitely unfortunate because we would be able to Dreams Away the Flage, play out the Murktide, and just have like aggressively lethal on our turn. But the clock is not going to be quite in our favor. Yep. Yeah, Flage Ren 6 ping, you're right. Or attack Ren ping. So, not sequencing into that Omnath actually ended up being what cost us because we could have exiled the Omnath, pumped up the Emperor, gotten the Omnath, played a land second main, and gained 4 off of their Omnath, which would have put us like well out of lethal range and drawn another card. Yeah, the lag is bad, but I definitely tanked a little bit longer than I should have in some of those early turns, especially the Ketra turns, trying to sequence things out. That being said, Ketra did do some work. I think if we'd had 2 more minutes to sequence, we would have had a good shot. I don't know if it would have been enough, but it would have been interesting to try. How's Ketra going to hold up to the 46 price tag? Maybe. I think the card's going to have like no desirability in standard. Like maybe it ends up in some tier 3 mid-range deck, but I don't think anything near the top really wants it. Maybe Domain, since they've got like leyline bindings and stuff. In Modern, it really feels like it comes down to a Frog variant and Black White Blink as the only decks that would even consider it. I've seen people say it's an auto include in Blink. I've seen people say it doesn't need to be there. It doesn't do anything for the deck. I don't know. I don't play that deck. And I don't think it's going to have a bunch of legacy appeal. So it might end up being a card that's like really good in the decks that want it. You're not really splashing for Ketra because you need to be splashing like for the Ketramos itself and the exile effects more than likely. And I think that's too big of an overhaul for a lot of decks. So I think in the short term it's going to keep its value, but I think in the long term I'm questionable. I got to throw back one land on the draw. Definitely tested it in Orzhov, but we're still trying to figure it out. Is it an immediate fit? Is in Frog? That is a fair breakdown. Belcher. Belcher and our opponent did have the turn 1 Lotus Bloom. But yeah, you can definitely feel where there's some lag with things like exiling from the graveyard, selecting cards in a zone with multiples. That's costing some time here and there. Satan, thank you so much for the follow. Hope you're having an awesome afternoon. Appreciate you coming around and hanging out. Why can't Daybreak get the lag issue figured out? I know when the last update was going on, there was a lot of talk about something involved with imaging for cards that was causing issues. I don't know the details, but seemed like a perfectly plausible explanation. Oh, can FrogTide and hope they don't have it, or sit on one counter spell and hope that's enough. Neither option feels great right now, but keep slapping. Slapping aftermarket parts on a 25-year-old car stuff is going to break. Possibly. Like I said, it's not really my area of expertise, so I don't want to make any assumptions. Like, I wouldn't mind simplifying down the program a lot as long as it's functional. Got okay. Anything I can do into a hard cast Char Belcher. Have to be sink into stupor. I already put one into the yard. Nope. On to game 2. At least it's better than it was a couple weeks ago. That is very true. So we got Stonies, Consign, Surgical. All seem pretty relevant. Ending doesn't look very good. Bell Snares pretty mid. Push is okay. Emperor doesn't look too good. Probably bringing back in an Emperor over a Murderous Cut. Have an extra threat. This is one of the matchups that I would definitely say non-Oculus suffers a bit. Just the threat consistency of Oculus getting something down on the board sooner rather than later is a big deal. Could try to risk it. We hit the second land on the top, we're kind of rolling, but if we miss it, we're kind of dead. And serviceable. I do want to go for the turn 1 Dreams of Steel and Oil in case they have a Lotus in hand. So 2 lands, Unable to Scream, Whir of Invention. Not a great hand. Not fixing MTGO without a complete overhaul at this point. I would believe that. I just don't know like what a complete overhaul of the program would even look like, so I don't want to assume. So if I play out this frog, it's just immediately getting dreams, or not dreams, Unable to Scream. That's something I want to do. I don't think so. I think I can hold. Try to find a piece of interaction for it. I can consider and like surveil land in the meantime. Sakay, and Neopoliticians. Thank you all so much for the follows. Hope you're both having an awesome afternoon so far. Welcome around. So we get Archive. With the Archive trigger on the stack, we're going to consider, because I want to use my consider and I don't want to see a card on top and just like have to draw that card without digging deeper. Like a Tameo. Get a Tameo flipped and it's pretty good at giving you some card advantage. Mega Chur, thank you so much for the follow as well. See, also, what made the no force negation decision in the list? Is it mainly just testing? It's mostly because you're adding in all of these non-blue cards to your deck. So the count for force gets pretty low, especially if you're like considering sink a land more often than not. This is 23 supporting force. You could probably make it to where force was playable, and I don't think you'd be super upset with that. All right, so opponent was kind enough to get rid of the Unable to Scream for us. So maybe we can keep this frog alive for a couple combats. Ultimately, I would like to find room to get force negation back in, but I really want to try out some of this stuff first to see if it has any merit before I start throwing stuff in that I'm unsure about. Pretty good pickup. Hydroelectric Specimen. So they've got Whir of Invention. They played their Sink into Stupor, and they've got a Flare of Denial. So I think I'm just going to counterspell this, hit with the frog, and plan on Stony Silence second main. So they can't Flare of Denial this. They can't. They've used their Sink into Stupor. Yeah, can't flare, use their sync, Whir does nothing. If they have a disrupting shoal, they couldn't disrupting shoal off of Whir or flare. They're tapped out from spell snare. I think that was just like the idealistic jam turn. Now, I could not tell you why they chose to go or to bolt in another springs instead of holding that up. I'm unsure as to what they could have here. That would cause that decision. Were for a Lotus, sure. I understand the decision. I guess if you just top deck like a Char Belcher, it's a pretty good choice. Okay, I'm kind of on board with it. Were portable hole. Well, if they were portable hole, it would mean that they didn't have a way to get a Lotus anymore. So they would need like a Lotus and a Tameshi and a Belcher. So I kind of think worrying for portable hole is saying, yeah, I can't do anything here. I'm just dead to rights. Part of me wants to discard the Ketramos because if I replay the Stony, they have to crack the Lotus Bloom to flare. I'm going to. I know that Ketramos could end up drawing me a couple cards here, but I think with double Frog active, if I just like make it through this turn sequence, it doesn't really matter. And I think getting rid of the Frog gives me more chances of getting through this one turn sequence. Or getting rid of the Ketramos, keeping the Stony Silence to put pressure on the Flare gives me more chances of getting through this one turn cycle or turn sequence than Ketramos does. If that makes any sense whatsoever. Now, on the draw, not really a great indictment of the new card for you to throw it away here. I mean, this is like one matchup in one spot that I haven't been super stoked to see Ketramos. I don't know if that's really an indictment on the card as much as, hey, I don't want this card right this second. And even then, it still would have been good. I just think the line that forces the issue with Stony Silence is a little bit better right there. It gets the Flare out of hand. I've got, like, they would have to get rid of the Lotus. I get the Flare out of hand. I've got the Stern Scolding if they top deck a Tameshi. I don't love this hand. If I go, I don't have an answer to a turn 2 creature. I've got Murktide. It's obviously really good. But I think I need to have a hand with like a Stern Scolding or a Spell Snare, push, something. Like interacting with the turn 2 creature makes Flare of Denial worse. And that's one of the ways that they can interact with like a Murktide. Anyone know why Spike is still streaming? I'm guessing just testing new cards. Be my guess. I really feel like people underestimate the impact of these 2-drop creatures out of Belcher. They do a lot of work enabling the rest of the deck. All right. Get down to Murktide next turn. Or Ketramose. They could have Jwari Disruption up. They don't currently have a Lotus suspended. But they can turn 4, play a land, whir for a Lotus, crack it, play Tameshi, go off. I kind of think my priority just needs to be on finding more interaction. Got a flare, got into the Flood Maw. They have a very reactive hand, but it's not a kill me hand. Which does mean that I might have a little bit of time. I'd like to recommend Overlord of the Belmerk over the Tamios in your list. Milling some cards seems like it would fit your deck better, in my very humble opinion. So I know you weren't here at the beginning of the video, but I did kind of mention that I put this list together just to try out a whole bunch of stuff that triggers Ketramose, which is important because Tamio cares about the drawing, but also flipping Tamio triggers Ketramose. So it's a little bit of a double synergy there to see if it's any worth. Overlord is fine, but you're not blinking Overlord. It's a turn 2 play that puts some stuff in the yard, but you don't really need to put more stuff in the yard since we're not on like an Oculus build. I like putting stuff in the yard is cool, but as important. Okay. Stern Scolding, I don't care about. Into the Flood Maw, I do. Flare of Denial, I do. I think I'm just going for a Murktide. See what happens. Volcanius, what's up? Yes, I am going to Charlotte. I will be there. We're just going to try to bait as much interaction out of hand as I can. Looks like they're just going to go for into the Flood Maw. Reasonable. They still have Flare. Flare, Stern Scolding, unknown. Here's another Murktide. Think so. You got Flare, Stern Scolding. Flare Scolding, Flare Scolding, Flare Scolding. Flare Scolding, unknown. Here's a Ketramos. Aw. We're letting it go. Now I think I'm going to go for a surgical on something. Just to get to draw an extra card off this Ketramos. Third copy of Sink into Stupor. Flare of Denial, Stern Scolding. Okay. Flare of Denial, Stern Scolding. No. Is there any way I can sequence this? Probably not. I think I just have to go for Ketramos. They go for the Flare. I think Murktide is like my more important threat to resolve here. I would love... I guess I can save this surgical for like a turn. That makes me feel a little bit worse about saving it for a turn. Now we surgical into the Flood Maw. Air 2 life. Take a look at all the magic cards that they've got. I mean, really, it's just like the 4 Belcher and 2 Tameshi. Cast a Murktide. 5, 6, 7. Hold up, consign in case they top deck a Char Belcher. Gonna feel really bad if their last card is a whir and they can whir for Belcher, but I feel like if they had a whir, then they should have just used it on their main phase. Can't play out the second Murktide, so no reason. Now they have Seagate Restoration. Okay. Am I saving this Cling to try to interact with something like a Lotus Bloom? Let's say I Cling to Dust one of my own spells. Goes to 6. I draw into a spell. Cast it 7, 8, 9. Like a ways from lethal. I think my best plan of attack is hit here, pass the turn, and try to Cling to fight over a Lotus in the yard and Consign to fight over like a hard cast Belcher. Cast with Replicate. 5 cards in hand. Let's replicate it 3 times. Just going to put 4 copies of Consigned to Memory on the stack, targeting the Char Belcher. So if they have like 3 mystical disputes, we beat that. If they do something like Word to Meshi, we can fight over that. They get, I got another Char Belcher. All right. And here into turn, I'm just going to Cling to Dust one of my own spells. No, still not lethal if I do that, so I'll Cling to Dust their Belcher. I've already used both of my surgicals, so. How do you beat a Flusterstorm, though? With the magic words of, yeah, bro, you got a Flusterstorm. You clearly wanted it more than I did. Yay. Okay, so 4-1, close to the 5-0, little lag 4-1. Pretty cool league, I will say. I think that Ketramos did do a lot of work. Rosie, good games as well, for sure. That game 3 hand, so much interaction, and then I realized you had like no pieces working towards combo at all. Like, all right, well, I'm just gonna keep throwing this Murktide out here, and maybe it'll stick eventually. Because I think my hand was just like double Murktide into Ketramos. So funny how that works out. Ketramos was, so you didn't have a third Murktide. Yeah, I had it in my hand for a few turns, but just like never find an opportunity to double Murktide. And then finally drew the Consign. It was like, okay, well, I'm never tapping out for Murktide now. This is my only chance of maybe interacting. Ketramos really good. I think that there were a few turns we might have gone a little bit overboard trying to Ketramos value when we didn't need to, but it did look really, really good against black-white mid-range, which is huge. That is a huge, huge, huge asset for a matchup like that. Prismatic Ending looked really good. Got to take out Delighted Halfling, got to take out a bunch of Aether Vials. They're definitely a fan of that piece of tech. Dreams of Steel and Oil, a lot better than I thought it would be. I think the exiling was relevant. I do miss the flexibility of Thoughtseize. There were some matches where we got to take a creature, but we didn't really need to take a creature, or taking something else might have been a better play. But we always had targets for it, which is really solid. Stern Scolding decent. Frog good. Yeah, I definitely think we're overkill on effects to kind of combo with Ketramos here. But I'd rather start high and work down than start too low and undersell the card. So, I don't know. We're just going to keep jamming it and see what happens.